ready for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull up, know it's going down. Foot on the gas, ain't no slowing down. Aiming for greatness, no settling. Kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Taking no else, yeah, I gotta win. Watch me kick down the doors, they won't let me in. Who running the game now? Foot on the gas, can slow down. No, my team, we holding it down. We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.
Welcome to the inaugural edition of a Cavalier Morning. Everybody's got a morning show. What about me? So let's go ahead and get things kicked off. Listen, this break has given me the opportunity to kind of reset and refresh and just get ready for the holiday season and get my shit together. And I feel like the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be able to do much the same. They don't play again until Friday. I'm kind of glad that we have had this stretch without Cleveland Cavaliers basketball, honestly, because the vibes have been terrible. I know I have not been the only person that has probably felt that way, and this is coming from one of the most optimistic fans, I feel like, in the entire fan base, but holy shit, it has been one of the most vibeless starts to the season for Cleveland that we have had in a while. I mean, we've had a number of seasons now that have been absolutely vibe-filled to kick it off, and I think everybody likes to point to last year where the Cavaliers were absolutely just scorching things. They were blazing a path out there. They got off to a 21-4 record through their first 25 games of the 2024-25 season. And lo and behold, you know, they started to make us feel like this was the standard and not something that was out of the ordinary. And we probably couldn't have been further from the truth. But at the same time, it felt like the team was trending in a much different direction from a competitiveness standpoint. And I know a lot of different things went right for Cleveland last year. I know the emergence of Ty Jerome was a big, big deal, and being able to get all these different contributions from certain players on the roster that hadn't necessarily stepped up the way they had, getting players that were healthy for a substantial amount of time, right? Darius Garland comes to the forefront of my mind when I think about the health conversation. Just last year, played 75 games during the regular season, added on more during the postseason, even though he was a little bit banged up, obviously, with the toe injury. And you have this culmination of events that resulted in the Cavaliers having what felt like a historic season for Cleveland anyways. And obviously it ended the way it did, but heading into the 2025-26 campaign, after all these moves were made, some of the new additions debuting, right, we felt like this team was going to take that next step. And obviously that has not happened just yet. We are just 25 games into this still very young season, but they have been very underwhelming. I don't think that is anything crazy to say. Through the first 25 games of this season, the team is just 14-11 and 7th in the Eastern Conference, if I'm not mistaken. Not where you want to be at as of right now. But as I mentioned, they will have an opportunity on their hands to really string together some victories here, and something that I feel like they haven't really done to begin this season. We've seen some small winning streaks, right? 3-4 games, right? They started the season off 3-1. They reeled off 3 straight victories against the Brooklyn Nets, Milwaukee Bucks, and Detroit Pistons. They reeled off 4 straight between Atlanta, Philly, Washington, and Chicago from at the start of November, early November. And since then, it's just kind of been win-loss, 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 right? Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap for you office peeps out there. I want some consistency from this team. And there might not be a better stretch of basketball to get some consistency under your belt if you are a struggling Cleveland team than what we are about to see come Friday when the Cavaliers kick off a 6-game stretch in which they should be able to really, really, really get back into the swing of things. They kick action off against the Washington Wizards, a team that they basically manhandled in early November as part of one of those mini win streaks. And they absolutely obliterated Washington on the glass as well as from beyond the arc, just absolutely pulling down everything in sight and shooting 40+% from 3-point range. That's the type of shit we want to see. We want to see consistency from some of the role players, consistency from the stars. We just want to see a consistent effort in a good way from this Cleveland team moving forward. And there's probably no better team than to start that off than against a Washington Wizards team that is absolutely struggling. They are dead last in the Eastern Conference. I mean, they're 3-19. It just does not get any better than that in terms of trying to get things off the ground if you are Cleveland. They are not a threat at all in terms of what they offer from a talent perspective. Does that mean they shouldn't worry? No. We all know the old adage of not being able or not taking your opponent that seriously. And Cleveland has fallen victim to that same way that other teams have throughout the entirety of NBA history. But as long as you get in there, take care of business, get back to playing a winning brand of basketball, I feel really optimistic that they can start stringing together some victories here. They will follow that matchup with the Washington Wizards with a date with the Charlotte Hornets, a team that honestly I'm tired of being connected to Cleveland in some capacity by the Cavs fans. It's not even from the front office. It's not from analysts or reporters or journalists or anything like that. The one dot that people are continuously connecting from the Charlotte Hornets is LaMelo Ball. Now, obviously, LaMelo Ball is a very talented player in his own right, but I cannot go a day without seeing the Cavaliers should trade for LaMelo Ball, things being said on social media or on YouTube. I'm just so fucking tired of seeing that pop up. No disrespect to LaMelo, but LaMelo just does not fit what Cleveland has going on here. It does not scream maturity to me in terms of where he is at from a mental perspective. And he misses a lot of games. So it just doesn't make any sense. That's what I'm trying to say. Regardless, this is a Charlotte team that is also really, really struggling at 7-17 and 12th in the Eastern Conference. Their last game came against the Denver Nuggets. I think they kind of fall in the same bucket as the Washington Wizards. Yes, they have some solid individual talents on their roster, but a threat to the Cavaliers is not something they should be as long as Cleveland looks to take care of business. And I think that they have absolutely everything at their disposal to be able to do so. There are some other Cleveland connections, right? Lonzo, LaMelo, right? The Ball brothers, Collin, Sexton, former Cavalier first-round pick. We all know those are names that people will constantly bring up in terms of these two teams because Collin, right? He was basically a key throw-in for the Donovan Mitchell trade. He was one of the reasons why Donovan Mitchell was able to be brought to Cleveland, being included in the trade that sent Lauri Markkanen to Utah, Collin Sexton to Utah, Ochai Agbaji, and a couple other picks and whatnot. But Collin Sexton in Cleveland will forever be linked because of said move. And I gotta admit, like, Collin, anytime I get to watch Collin Sexton play basketball is a delight to me. I know that many people are not huge fans, probably never were, but I always believed in Collin Sexton. I always believed that he kind of got a raw deal because not only the injury, but I think the Cavaliers just didn't know quite how to make the duo of Darius Garland and Collin Sexton work simultaneously. And I think at times you have seen that play out, at least in the early going between Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, not necessarily to the same degree because Donovan is obviously coming to Cleveland was a lot more mature and had adjusted to playing next to somebody with the ball in their hands and could contribute off ball. Collin couldn't necessarily say the same thing. Collin was always somebody in Cleveland, at least, that was more impactful with the ball in his hands as opposed to being able to play off ball consistently and reliably. Now, since he's left, it's been kind of shitty, right? Not necessarily his play, because I genuinely believe that had Utah actually given him a good amount of play time, Collin Sexton probably could have been way more impactful than he was while he was in Utah. But I always wanted this dude to end up on a contender because he just seems like a player to me that could impact a championship contender, or at least a playoff contender off the bench. Somebody that can come in, score, somewhere between 16 to 18 points pretty efficiently and just kind of give you a spark. And I think that for Collin, that's the perfect career outlook. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, over in Charlotte right now, through 21 games, Collin Sexton is averaging 15.5 points and 4.2 assists while shooting 48.9% from the field, including 36.6% from three-point distance. Not bad at all. And he's doing that whilst coming off the bench for the most part. He has only started 10 of his 21 appearances there. And I think that's just kind of where the story is right now with Collin, who at this point in time is in his age 27 season. He's actually going to turn 27 here in about 15 days or so, if I'm not mistaken, 15 or 16 days. And I think that he's getting ready to enter his prime. Hopefully he is able to get to a contender eventually, because his skill set really just would mesh well with, I think, a lot of teams that could use that scoring off the bench. And honestly, I'm going to say this, and I don't want people to take it the wrong way. There are points where you could see like a Collin Sexton level player, a Collin Sexton level scorer working for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Would that work? No. And obviously that's heavily tied to the departure of Ty Jerome. But Cleveland, their need for a bucket getter, you can see what I'm saying. That will never happen. I don't expect that to happen. And I honestly wouldn't attempt to try and trade for Collin. But I'm just saying, it just goes to show that that type of archetype can be useful in the NBA, especially for a contending team. Now, they will follow up that matchup with the Charlotte Hornets with back-to-back games against the Chicago Bulls. One in Chicago and one at home at Rocket Arena. December 17th and December 19th should be very interesting because the Chicago Bulls, they're weird, man. They were like the last unbeaten team in the NBA, only to have really just been really shitty over their last couple of games or so. And I think that you see the individual talents, like similar to the Charlotte team that I just talked about. They have some really good individual talents. Josh Giddey is not a slouch by any means. Nikola Vucevic can still really impact the game, especially as a floor spacer and a rebounder. Matas Buzelis is a young player that should continue to get better. And I think that some of the role players they have here, right? Our old buddy, old pal, Isaac Okoro, who was moved in the trade to get Lonzo Ball. He is actually quietly having a solid season for his standards. And I know that people don't necessarily believe that Isaac lived up to his draft slot, and that's fine. Okay, if you want to consider him a bust, considering the context of where he was drafted, that's up to you. But Isaac is quietly having a solid season. He's averaging 8.2 points, 2.7 rebounds. He's shooting 45.9% from the field, including a respectable 38.3% from three-point distance on over 3.1 attempts per game. And so you see some of what he did in Cleveland carrying over to Chicago, especially on the defensive end. He's doing that in about 25 minutes of action. All of his appearances have been starts for that Chicago team. You look at role players like that. You look at Ayo Dosunmu, Dylan Terry, right? There are definitely some pieces on that Chicago Bulls team that are better than what their record tends to show as a unit. Now, I thought after they kicked off the season as hot as they did, that they would keep that shit rolling and maybe be a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. And obviously just 25 games into the year, just like with this Cleveland team, but to a much worse degree, they have been really underwhelming. I think that for Chicago, obviously the expectations are much different. And so you can't put these two in the same spectrum in terms of expectations. But Chicago, since that hot start where they were starting to turn a couple of heads, they've cooled off majorly and now should be a relatively easier battle to win for this Cavs team that needs to string together some victories in the worst way possible. They still do some things over there that can really hurt Cleveland. As of right now, they are second in the NBA in terms of pace at 102.6. We know that Cleveland has often struggled this year to do battle with teams that play with a quicker pace out there, especially due to their transition defense not necessarily being up to par right now. We don't want that to be the case for this Cavaliers team. We know that Chicago, just like they did last year, they love to take a lot of triples. That's never something that I love to see the Cavaliers facing off against, because even if teams are knocking them down at a low rate on the season, they always seem to get hot versus Cleveland. Now, on the season right now, Chicago is attempting 38.1 triples per game, if I am not mistaken. They're not a team that you really want to try and, outscore in terms of that three-point shot, because we know that Cleveland has fallen victim to that in the past. And, it's, to me, it's not something that Cleveland couldn't win, but we have seen how over-reliant this Cleveland team has been when they try and outshoot teams. It just does not work out. And still, right, through the first 25 games of the season, Cleveland is leading the entire NBA in three-point attempts per game at 44, and they're only shooting 34.3%. Chicago, on the other hand, is at least knocking down around league average, 36.6. And a lot of this obviously has to do with who has been missing from this team. No Sam Merrill, no Jarrett Allen, no Max Strus, no guys that really impact the overall flow of the offense. Some of the best shooters have missed some time, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that three-point percentage is going to eventually go back up to a respectable level, but I think I would like to see the attempts themselves go down and get into that sweet spot. And I don't think necessarily you can boil it down and be so black and white as to say, like, oh, this team should take this many amount of attempts, or they should stick to this specific number, because we all know every single game is different. Every single opponent is different. They're going to require you to do different things defensively and switch things up. Some teams you can antagonize on the interior a little bit more than others. Other teams, you're going to have to make sure that you are able to knock down that shot from the perimeter, because they're going to absolutely lock things down in the interior and make life difficult on your ball handlers and drivers. But they have to find that good balance. And so far, I just don't think they've done that. They have had games in which they've absolutely dominated teams on the interior. I mean, we just talked about a game in which they scored 80-plus points in the paint, only to turn around and rely upon that perimeter shot once more. And again, I know that they're trying to shoot their way out of slumps. They're trying to figure it out on the fly, and they have had a lot of lineup inconsistency, but I want to see them find some level of consistency in terms of how many shots they're taking. It's never going to be perfect, because, like I said, each game is going to require you to do something a little different. But I do think that they should be able to find some sort of semblance of consistency. Like I said, they have those two back-to-back games against the Chicago Bulls. And then, lo and behold, they'll play the Charlotte Hornets again, which is crazy to me. You got Wizards, Hornets, Bulls, Hornets in a 5-game stretch between December 12th and December 22nd. Same things apply to that Hornets matchup on the 22nd that apply to the Hornets matchup on the 14th. And I'll be very, very interested to see if we get any returns in terms of the players that have missed time, right? Do we get an update on Sam Merrill or Jarrett Allen? Do we potentially see Max Strus finally make his debut, similar to where he did around this time last year for Cleveland? Last year, he debuted against Milwaukee. Maybe he debuts on the 17th against Chicago. I don't expect that to happen, as we've heard that he is, weeks away as of the last reporting. But I'm just saying, maybe we'll get lucky and one of these guys comes back healthy enough to contribute. And we know that as this stretch wears on, the likelihood of these guys returning only gets higher and higher. So even if they do continue to miss games, as long as you can get past this stretch of relatively easy games and emerge victorious more often than not, hopefully in every single one with the level of talent and competition they're getting ready to face. That should make you feel better because you will have bought these guys extra time. They will follow that Hornets matchup up with a date with the New Orleans Pelicans, one of the more, I'd say, they're a pretty damn bad team right now, right? 3-22 in terms of record, 15th in the Western Conference. We know Washington is 15th in the East. So those are two of the worst teams in the NBA, the two worst teams from a record standpoint in the NBA. But they do have some fun pieces over there that continue to intrigue me, right? Derek Queen obviously comes to mind. This dude is coming off, I think, the first triple-double in NBA history as a rookie with, what was it, 25 plus points, 10 plus rebounds, 10 plus assists, and 4 plus blocks, something like that. And we know that he scored at least 30 plus. I think he put up 32 in that game, or 33, while having all those additional statistics, which is absolutely insane for a rookie big man. I think they really, really scored big on that Derek Queen acquisition. On the season as a whole, Queen is averaging 12.9 points, 6.4 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1 steal, and 0.8 blocks while shooting 49.6% from the field. Not a floor spacer by any means right now. He's only knocking down 11.1% of his three-point attempts. But I think in time, he might actually get there. Aside from that, Herb Jones is still over there, a player that many people in the Cleveland spectrum would still love to get their hands on. I know that's never likely to happen, but I say that to say they have some individual talents over there, right? Trey Murphy is another player that Cleveland fans will probably love to have right now. He's putting up 21 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 3.6 assists while having a pretty productive and efficient season there, despite the Pels record. You still got guys like Yves Missy going into his second season. It's a player that I really like from a role perspective there. Jose Alvarado, Jeremiah Fears. There's a lot of players over there that, in terms of, and Jordan Poole, can't forget about him. There's a lot of players on that roster that individually intrigue me, but obviously they're going to shift things over the next couple of seasons as they look to field a competitive team going into a rebuild. So we'll see what ends up happening with New Orleans over time. But as of right now, they should be absolutely no threat to this Cleveland team as long as Cleveland actually gets their shit together and takes them seriously. That's probably the number one thing for me. Take your opponent seriously during this stretch. So there you have it right there. Those are the first 6 games back for the Cavaliers. The Washington Wizards, the Charlotte Hornets, you got the Bulls twice, you got the Hornets again, and then the Pels. None of these teams are over 500. Now, I pointed this out in an article that I pinned the other day, but the Cavaliers have actually struggled in games against opponents that are over 500. As of recording this right now, the Cavaliers are just 5-10 against teams above 500. But what they have done is supplement that with victories over opponents that are below 500. They have really capitalized on the easier games thus far. So I think that they can, at the very least, to get that done during the stretch, and they'll be in a much better place as they attempt to climb back into the top 4 in the East. They are 9-1 against teams right now that are below 500, which is one of the better marks in the NBA. And honestly, that's how it should be. Really, you need to be feasting on those opportunities. You need to be capitalizing on the games that people consider to be easy. You need to be able to defeat opponents that are deemed inferior on a consistent basis. And 6 straight games against opponents that are below 500, that's a big deal. And then the big one, right? You get all these tune-ups, which is how I would categorize them, before you face off against what many people believe to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, in the New York Knicks, who, as we speak, are second in the East at 17-7. We're coming off a big victory over the Toronto Raptors, a team that has beaten up on Cleveland this year. So I think that is the game, especially on Christmas Day. I mean, you don't get many of those if you're a Caps fan. You want to see the Cavaliers absolutely come out, take care take care of business and get up for a big matchup, because this is a team, assuming Cleveland gets that far, will the team will have to go through. Let's just put it that way. New York is not going anywhere anytime soon. We keep seeing these rumors about Giannis potentially to New York. I don't think that's going to be something that happens, but it's always a possibility that even with that being without that being the case, it's not like New York doesn't have a huge level of talent over there in their core. I mean, you're talking about the likes of Jalen Brunson, right? Guy averaging almost 30 points this year, 28.3 to be exact. You still got Karl Anthony Towns over there, OG, Michael Bridges. You think of how much Josh Hart, right? You think of how much over the years New York has given Cleveland problems at times, especially on the offensive glass. And I know so many people refuse to let that 2022-23 playoff series go away from their minds, as the quote is etched in their brain, right? From Jarrett Allen, lights are too bright, right? Nights brighter than expected, whatever, what have you. That's obviously not the same New York Knicks team over there, but they do still have a player that has given Cleveland issues in the past in Mitchell Robinson, who is pulling down 4.6 offensive rebounds per game through his 16 appearances. They're still a huge threat. They're still somebody that Cleveland is going to have to go through. And as of right now, they have played much better. They have looked like the better team. I don't think that when all is said and done that they are the better team, but I do and have to concede New York has played like the better team at this point in time. I believe that Cleveland is a much better team than they have played. So we'll have to see how the remainder of their respective seasons go, but that is a huge matchup from both a record standpoint and a confidence standpoint, a much needed confidence booster. I already mentioned they are just 5-10 against opponents that are over 500. Getting a victory over this New York Knicks team that is the second seeded team in the East right now, I think that could be a big confidence booster. And I don't think that's something crazy to think. Right now, according to their fan base over there, they're a much better team than Cleveland. I always love to see New York Knicks fans up in arms about losing to Cleveland. So I hope that ends up being the case. But I'll be lying to you if I said that I wasn't at least a little bit concerned about that matchup, considering how the Cavaliers have managed to start this season. Because entering the season, I'm like, oh my God, I love this Christmas Day matchup. This should be one that Cleveland should put on a show for, and they still have the opportunity to do that. But it looks a lot less certain with how they have begun this season. I hope they really, truly get up for that one. But that stretch of games right now, that's fucking doozy, right? In a good way. You get 6 what I would consider tune-up games against the Eastern cellar dwellers, and you got to throw the New Orleans Pelicans in there out west. But you get that, and then you get some heavy hitters. You get the Houston Rockets. You get a San Antonio Spurs team that Cleveland should be able to beat. Right? They did emerge victorious against San Antonio back on the 5th, but now that was without Wemby, and you never really know what you're going to get in terms of those matchups, because there's just such an interesting dynamic in terms of how small they play without Wembanyama out there. They have to start Bismack Biyombo, which is very tough for them to do. Then you got Phoenix on the Christmas, well, not Christmas, on New Year's Eve. You end the year off, you end the calendar year off against a Phoenix Suns team that is being led by former assistant coach Jordan Ott, who really, really has them playing terrific basketball in a Western Conference that's pretty fucking brutal. They're 7th in the West as of recording this, but their last game came against the Minnesota Timberwolves, in which they won 108-105. In terms of offensive rating, they're 11th out of the 30. They are 14th in defensive rating, so they hold their top 15 in both of those areas. As a result, they are top 12 in net rating at plus 2.4. and they're 14-10 on the season. So I think that you cannot walk into that matchup thinking you're hot shit, because Jordan Knott will quickly remind you that, hey, I was a mastermind on that coaching staff last year, and I know what you guys like to do. And that's not me saying that's what's going to happen. That's me saying that that should be a pretty damn good matchup. I can't wait to see it, to be quite honest. Dylan Brooks, Donovan Mitchell, there are a lot of different things that could potentially could go awry in that matchup. And who knows how long Jalen Green will be out. I think that they expect him to be back maybe in January, but I'm really interested to see how that Phoenix Suns team fares as the season wears on, because to be quite honest, I didn't really expect them to be all that good this year, especially after the departure of Kevin Durant. But they have been an interesting watch. They have some of the best three-point shooters in the entire NBA over there right now, which is fucking insane. But I think that they have been overall a very, very fun team to watch. And when I talk about three-point percentage, right, they're a team that can absolutely obliterate you if you don't watch out. The Phoenix Suns, as we speak, are in the top 12 in three-point percentage. They shoot 36.8% from range. They are top 8 in three-point attempts per game at 39.7. So they're another team that lets it fly like Cleveland, maybe not to the level of the Cavaliers, as Cleveland has just been so reliant on that three-point shot to begin the year. But they're a team that could definitely hurt the Cavs if they don't contain that perimeter shot or make sure to rotate, close out, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know. But that's a pretty solid stretch of games to in the 2025 calendar year. You got some lowly matchups against the bottom teams in the NBA, and you balance that out with some big time matchups against teams like Houston and York and Phoenix. So that's a pretty good balance. You get a reprieve, similar to this break that we're having right now, with some of the matchups that you see as soon as they come back, and then you get some heavy hitters. So we'll see what ends up happening with that slate of games, but I'm fairly confident that they'll be able to emerge with a record above 500 in this this December slate of games. We'll have to see how that ends up. Quick shout out to Nae'qwan Tomlin. Today is his 25th birthday. This dude has quickly become one of my favorite players on this roster, maybe my favorite player, just because of his story. It's not every day that a dude who plays absolutely no organized high school hoops ends up in the NBA and winds up on a team that should be a contender. That's the key word, should. Not every day that a player takes and makes the best of his opportunities. And I think that Tomlin has done that. I've already talked ad nauseum about a lot of the cool statistics that he's managed to put up. I'll mention them right now. Again, though, he is in the 95th percentile in block percentage among forwards right now at 2.2%. He is in the 98th percentile in offensive rebounding percentage at 10.1%. And he's a pretty damn good putback guy out there as well. One of the guys that you always have to be aware of where he is positionally if you are an opposing defense, because he can put a shot back at the drop of a hat. I posted his entire putback reel on YouTube and X as well, just for those that want to take a look at that. And in 15 games, he's got over 2 minutes worth of content in that department, which is crazy for a player only seeing the court for 17 minutes per game. So Tomlin, man, I hope that he continues to grow and develop, because he could make a couple of players on this roster expendable after this season or even at the deadline. I don't think the Cavaliers will make a move at the deadline, sending anybody out, but I do think that there is validity in the belief that he could potentially take over Dean Wade's role if they don't re-sign Dean Wade, or he could slide right into the rotation and not have to worry about looking over his shoulder for minutes and somebody stealing his. But shouts out to Nae'qwan Tomlin on his 25th birthday. Something else that I thought was really fun, really cool. I don't know how many of you guys saw the latest episode of Mind Your Game, but they were doing a Q&A on there, I think a mailbag episode. And one of the questions that was asked was, I think, something along the lines of, what was your peak or what was your best individual season, something like that. When did you feel at your best or most complete as a player? I forget the absolute wording of it. But LeBron's answer was what I think many people feel is his best individual season. He said that he felt his most complete back during the 2017-18 season. And I think we all agree to that for the most part. Now, don't get me wrong. There have been, like, if you're a believer in LeBron of 2013 due to his defensive abilities and, just the sheer two-way play that he showcased back in 2013 for the Miami Heat, I have absolutely no problems with that. If you believe that he was at his best in his first stint in Cleveland, for the 07-08 or 08-09 seasons, that's, there's a lot of different years. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of different seasons that you can pick from LeBron, a guy who's played 23 plus years now. It's not every day that you have so many different seasons that you can pick from to say this is peak, right? This is a peak performance from this player. And for LeBron, that's been the case, which is crazy. What was it, 22, 23 years? All I know is that it often feels like there's no wrong answer, but if I had to pick one myself, I do honestly believe that the 2017-18 season, in which this man went absolutely bonkers, carrying the Cavaliers to an NBA Finals, and obviously they had no business winning against the Golden State Warriors team that was still stacked with KD and company, and they were never going to win that series. I know game one, notwithstanding with the JR blunder and whatnot, and George Hill missing the free throws. That to me was his best individual effort. I think that he was locked in. I think that from a killer instinct perspective, the people that talk about how unclutched LeBron is, you saw multiple games during that season where, like, if LeBron doesn't cook or if he doesn't knock down a last second shot, the Cavaliers are a bottom seeded team in the Eastern Conference and have no shot at making it through the first round of the playoffs if LeBron doesn't have a Herculean effort to get them there consistently. And so watching him do what he did during that season, it was magical. And I know that you get to a point with Bron where it's like, okay, when is this guy going to call it a career? And when you get to that point, when LeBron finally decides that he's going to hang them up, it's going to be a sad day in basketball for not just Cleveland fans, but for NBA fans in particular, because he's just felt like a constant for so long. I mean, literally, he has been playing this game of basketball at the pro level for 22, 23 plus years. Absolutely insane. He has played basketball longer than some of you have been alive, which is a crazy thing to say. Came into the NBA rather in 2003-2004 season, and from the jump was expected to be a franchise savior, and that's basically what he was. He just didn't get the support that he needed in his first stint. I think that they could have done a lot better in regard to building around him, putting a championship contender around him. And don't get me wrong, there are obviously times in which he failed, right? There are times in which Bron melted or he just wasn't there for the moment or he wilted, whatever you want to call it, right? There have been times throughout his first stint, there have been times throughout his career where LeBron, I think the one that comes to mind for everybody is the 2011 finals against the Dallas Mavericks, obviously, when he wilted under pressure. But for better or worse, during his first stint in Cleveland, I think that he didn't get enough help. And in coming back to Cleveland for 4 seasons, I think that Bron made good. And watching him during that 2017-18 season was just a magical sight. Watching him win a title, hoist up the championship trophy back during the 2016 finals. That was a moment that will probably always be with me. I think we all shed a collective tear when LeBron gets on camera and they capture and saying, Cleveland, this is for you. And you just felt the raw emotion of it all. But I say all that to say there are so many different seasons where you can point to LeBron being at his absolute peak. And to hear LeBron himself say 2017-18 was where I was at, where I was the most complete of a player, I think that's cool, objectively speaking. Evan Mobley, the Evan Mobley discourse to me is such a wild thing, because the latest thing that is being said is that he is not a player that is considered quote unquote nasty. According to Cavs Nation, post this on Twitter, an anonymous NBA coach says Evan Mobley isn't dominant or nasty. And I think this actually comes via ESPN, but they also suggest he's a good piece, just not dominant. I'm not sure he has it. He's not nasty. He's skilled, but not nasty with elite skills. Evan and that entire team is on the skilled side, not nasty. And there you have it. I think there is a consensus around the NBA that Evan Mobley is kind of just a nice guy. He is not somebody that can lead a team, not somebody that can be consistently aggressive, not somebody that you can lean on to carry you home. And I think that we're at a point in time with Evan Mobley where people have already written him off for being like he is who he is. I don't necessarily think you need Evan Mobley to be a nasty guy. I don't think you need him to be somebody that's a shit talker out there. Would you like to see that from time to time just for entertainment purposes? Yeah, but there's no direct correlation between being nasty and winning. There are nasty players that have not won. There are nasty players that have. Yes, I know a lot of people want him to be that cagey, talk shit in your face, let you're a bum when you're on the court with them. You want him to be Draymond Green levels of nasty out there at times. And I just don't think that's in the nature of Evan Mobley, but I've never believed that he has to be that type of player. He is quite reserved. My issue with Evan Mobley has just been him being too non-vocal in terms of the touches. I don't necessarily think you have to be nasty to get those touches, though. You have to willingly demand the rock. And I just think that that is a mental thing that Mobley has yet to truly tap into at times. I think entering the season, they really made a push for him to have the ball in his hands, obviously. And you see that reflected in his career high usage rate as of right now. But I still believe that Evan Mobley can be a dominant big man in this NBA. I think you have seen specific instances of that being the case. Does he need to be a nasty, quote unquote, nasty type of player to win and win at the highest level? I don't think so. I think you've seen bigs do it and not have that mentality. But I also think a lot of things have to go right for Mobley. I think he has to continue to demand those touches. I think the Cavaliers, the way in which he is utilized, that has to be a bit more consistent, because there have been games where Mobley, there's nobody that can fucking stop him. And then they go away from getting him the ball, because as a big man, and make no mistake, Evan Mobley is still a big, no matter how skilled he is, you're going to need some type of decent point guard play for Evan to get into his spots consistently. He's not somebody that's going to routinely be able to put the ball on the floor. I love Mobley, but he is not Giannis. He's not somebody that will consistently get the ball in his hands, dribble, drive, force his way to the rim. Can he do that? Yes. Will that happen on every single possession? No, and I don't think it should on a team that is comprised the way it is for the Cavaliers. I think that there are a lot of weapons on this team. I think that you don't necessarily need to lean into spamming the hell out of one in particular. I think you have to spread the wealth and spread the attempts around, and not necessarily fall into being a predictable offense. I think egalitarian is the way to go for a lot of these teams that are comprised the way that the Cavaliers are. But I think you still need to prominently feature him. He needs to be one of the players on the team with the maybe no less than second fewest shot attempts. I say that with Darius Garland included because I think at this point in time, what I want to see from Darius is consistent facilitation and playmaking, dribble driving, penetrating, getting the ball to his guys out on the perimeter. Yes, he can get into his spots. Yes, he was one of the best drivers last year in terms of sheer volume, one of the most efficient too. But in order to get Mobley to where he needs to be, I think that you need a collective step back from Donovan and Darius in terms of field goal attempts so that you can get Mobley consistent touches game in and game out and not have him be some distant third option most nights, which is where you get some of these games where Mobley is heavily featured in the first half of a game and then they completely go away from him in the second half or vice versa. You've seen it play out a number of times already this year. And I think if you can consistently feature him throughout the duration of game, and Mobley plays a huge role in this as well, then you'll be okay. And that is perfectly fine with me. But I think the discourse on Evan Mobley is heavily skewed as of right now. I think that you really need to see a full postseason of Evan Mobley. And I don't think we really got that last year with the injuries that he sustained for me to be able to suggest, this is just who he is. He can't be somebody. He can't be dominant out there. He can't be a leading man on an offensive attack. And honestly, I don't think he necessarily has to be number one option. I think that if he is no worse than 1B to Donovan Mitchell's 1A out there, I think you can still make some noise and get to the finals. That's just me. Darius Garland trade stuff, I think that it's beginning to get old really quickly because there aren't a lot of players from a salary perspective that match up well enough for you to be able to move that money because as we know right now, and unless you're shedding like a whole bunch of salary, you can't aggregate for this Cavs team that's dealing with the second apron restrictions and the new CBA being what it is. And so there aren't a lot of salary slots league wide that match what Darius Garland makes enough for you to want to pull the trigger. Yes, from a monetary perspective, Ja Morant works, but is Ja really a player that you'd want to have in Cleveland, considering he has no real jump shot consistently and is showcased to be less than mature? Is that really a presence you want to bring into your locker room? LaMelo Ball, that is somebody that I think consistently is tied to Cleveland in terms of trade discussions. And I already explained to kick things off, LaMelo just doesn't make a lot of sense to me if you're making a trade because he misses double the amount of games that Darius is. He is not nearly as efficient, and he has some maturity issues of his own right. So I don't think either of those make sense. And some of the other moves that have been suggested, I just don't think they really fit what Cleveland needs at this point in time, nor does it help the other team enough for them to want to pull the trigger. So I think that as that article that we recently saw, I think that you need to be able to have a move out there that makes sense on both sides and isn't done in the season. No move the Cavaliers make this year, if it includes Darius Garland, is probably going to push them closer into title contention. We know that when this dude is healthy, he can legitimately be one of the best orchestrators in the league. He did so just last year in his 75 appearances. And I think that the Cavaliers played some of their best basketball with Darius Garland on the court. They actually outscored opponents with him on the court, and Donovan Mitchell off, juxtaposed to when Donovan was on the court and Darius was off of it, if that helps you reconcile a couple of things. Case in point, I think that Darius Garland gets a lot of unjust hate. He's coming off a very tricky toe injury, and he is clearly still dealing with that. He's not 100%, but he's trying to gut through it and play through it. And this is something that can unfortunately linger throughout the duration of the 2025-26 season and very well into the playoffs. But as of right now, I just don't think the answer is ship him out. I just don't think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that if they do make any move that centers around DG as the central piece heading out, I don't think that it will be done until after this year. And I don't expect that to be the case either, but I at least acknowledge that if it does happen, it's very not likely to happen until the end of this year, pending the outcome. If they flame out again, go out in the second round or before that, God forbid that. But if it happens, yeah, he'll probably be on the chopping block. And I don't necessarily have an issue with that as long as it brings in a piece that makes sense. But I think that people are too prematurely trying to ship his ass out when he's coming off of an unfortunate injury. And I just don't think that's one, it's not fair. And I know life is not fair, but I just don't think it is the right approach. But I know that fans lack patience and understanding and context. It doesn't matter. And we throw it out the window when it comes to a player you're just ready to get rid of and move on from. And sadly, that's the case for Darius Garland in the eyes of many fans, which I don't understand, but I can't tell you how to feel. DeAndre Hunter in his best role. I continuously have entering this year, I believed that this was his best opportunity to secure that starting role, especially with who was out and how many injuries in particular they were dealing with. And I was really happy about DeAndre Hunter starting, right, beside the likes of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen. And there's still a lot of potential there. But it's looking worse and worse because he is struggling on both ends right now. It just doesn't seem from an effort standpoint to be completely locked in. And I think a lot of this can simply be boiled down to the way that he's being used, the rotations he's being included in, and simply trying to function more and fit more around what lineups calls for. And I think that right now, when you're playing beside a Donovan Mitchell, who's looking like an MVP player, when you're playing beside Evan Mobley, who the Cavaliers are obviously trying to prop up, and Darius Garland returning, that obviously kicks you out to being the fourth option in the offense most nights when all three of those guys are healthy. And in order to be and to make use of his best individual skill set, which is his on-ball creation, in my opinion, I think it behooves them, or it should behoove them, to move him to the bench to be that bucket getter that we saw Ty Jerome be last year, and we saw DeAndre do at points last year with Cleveland. And obviously, we know that he can be a really, really dependable scorer coming off the bench with the ball in his hands. But it is harder for him to function that way when he's in the starting lineup trying to share touches with these guys. And so as time has gone on, and with the breakout that we have seen from Jalen Tyson, I think it's time to potentially consider that switch if you are Kenny Atkinson, because I think that Tyson has proven to you that he can be a reliable off-ball contributor as somebody that can impact the game without having the ball in his hands for most of the game. Will he get his touches? Yeah, but he doesn't need them to be productive. He has been one of the best off-ball shooters in the game, one of the best catch and shooters, one of the most efficient catch and shooters in the league to begin the year. He's been somebody that will outdo Hunter on the glass, especially the offensive rebounds. I think that's big time, something they've been clamoring for out of that position for years. And I think all of these things have culminated in Tyson looking like the better fit in the starting unit beside Darius and company. That's not a slight against DeAndre. I just think that Hunter, to make best use of his skill set, contrary to what we all believed entering the year, it's starting to look like Tyson is the better man for that role. And I don't have a problem admitting that. Could that change? Yes. Could Tyson cool off? Absolutely. Could DeAndre get hot and look like he belongs in the starting unit? Yes. But some of that too is defensively. And we've seen Hunter look lackadaisical. We've seen him ball watch at times. We've seen him get blown by, which irritates me to no end. And Tyson is not without his own warts on that end, right? He is somebody that consistently probably fouls too much, a little too handsy at times, but I still see that beginning to level out as his experience level goes up. Tyson has only been in the league a year and a half at this standpoint. So I think that as of right now, I lean heavily start Tyson, get Hunter coming off the bench, but I'm not the man that is making decisions. So I remain really curious to see what Kenny Atkinson decides to do. All right, before we get out of here, let's hop into the chat real quick. Calhead Bilk says, Mac, thoughts about the Doomsday trailer might coming out this Thursday, Friday. I cannot fucking wait to see what they do with Doomsday. I've heard the leaks. I've seen the leaks. I don't know what they're going to have RDJ do in reference to how he enters the MCU. And I think that is going to be a really, really fun thing, right? We saw a glimpse of the Doom character in Fantastic Four in the post-credit scene. Sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen that movie. And I think that there's some interesting things they could do there with Loki and how they introduce Doom into it all, as we've heard that it will be a direct sequel to Endgame, but leaks are leaks, right? We don't really know how true they are. We don't really know what to take into consideration. I really don't know what direction they're going to go in with Doomsday, but what I can say is I'm extremely excited, especially as a Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man fan, Marvel fan, overall. But I'm really, really curious to see that trailer. I almost pondered getting tickets to Avatar just so I could see that fucking trailer, which is crazy because I think that's where they're going to first showcase it. Mustafa Shah says Lonzo normally gets his rhythm after all-star break each of seasons. I think that a lot of that is also pending health too. It is not a given that Lonzo makes it to the all-star or post all-star. That's not a given. I wanted that to be the case, but time will tell. They're managing him quite well. He looks healthy as he's ever been, and I'm hoping that he gets to that point, but it's not a given. So we'll see. Cavs 620 says, do you think the Cavs need to commit to Mobley to and put him in a position to be the best player? Or do you think they have but just Mobley hasn't been that guy consistently? I think they began the season trying to force feed Mobley these additional touches, trying to get him comfortable with being no worse than the second option in a Cavaliers offense that needed him to take that step. And you saw like it was hit and miss. I think they definitely made a commitment, but I think Evan definitely didn't necessarily look up to the task completely just yet. I think he's still growing as an offensive contributor. Well, not an offensive contributor, as an offensive focal point. That's the way I'll word that. I think he's still growing there, but I don't think that they're at a place in time right now where they just have to say, fuck it, we need to get him every single touch, because I've seen how that works out, and I don't love it. In games where it is working, I just want you to stay with it. I want Kenny Atkinson and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell to continuously get him the ball when they have a mismatch out there. And I need Mobley to be more vocal in that too. And that has always been the case with him. Delaware says, Cavs need to flip Mobley. Nope, not going to spend a bunch of time on that. Not doing that. Red VR says, yo, what's up, man? Appreciate you for joining. Dr. Claus 77 says, as long as Mobley continues to erase opponent offensive possessions the way he does while giving the ball back to the Cavs, I don't need him to fit whatever people think he should be. I think that's very well put. Mobley is somebody that will, in fact, make life difficult defensively. Always. He will, right? He won Defensive Player of the Year. He came close to winning it much, much earlier. But I think that from an offensive perspective, there's still a lot of growth that can occur, but we're still too early to try and pigeonhole him into being, oh, he needs to be this, he needs to be that. He's still a very young player, and so I'm trying to be patient with him. And I think that Dr. Claw is as well. Well, guys, I appreciate you for joining the inaugural edition of a Cavalier Morning. I'm going to try and do this pretty consistently, as I think that I love hopping on here in the mornings when I got a little bit of free time and chopping it up with y'all. But as always, tell you, if you'd like to reach out, you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to be added to the It's Cavalier Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review to itscavalier53@gmail.com, and I will send you said invite. Go Cavs.